Hello there, you're watching the press preview. A first look, of course, at what is on the front pages. Time to see what's making the headlines with the political editors of The Guardian and The Sun, Pippa Crerar and Harry Cole, who are with us from now until just before midnight. Welcome back to both of you. So to the front pages then, let's start with the Metro. It says England kicked off their World Cup campaign with a historic win, but it was opponents Iran who won praise for their protests over human rights violations at home. The Sun also splashing on England's World Cup victory, picturing opening goal scorer Jude Bellingham. The Guardian leads with a report that Justice Secretary Dominic Raab is facing fresh questions over his behaviour during his first stint in the role. The Daily Mail reporting that MPs have been told for the first time they can host Christmas parties and claim for refreshments and decorations. The Eye reports that EU officials say Number 10 and the Treasury are guilty of wishful thinking over claims they can pursue a closer relationship with the EU without adopting laws such as freedom of movement. Telegraph's front page is a report that Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer will tell the Confederation of British Business, the CBI, that Britain must end its economic dependence on immigration. The Times says Britain's leading specialists have predicted that patients with advanced cancers will see their life expectancy double within the decade thanks to new treatments. The Financial Times leads with reports that senior Walt Disney executives led a campaign against Chief Executive Bob Chapek over the summer that resulted in his ousting and replacement with predecessor Bob Iger. And a reminder, by scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers while you watch us or our guests. So let's head, shall we, to Pippa Crerar and Harry Cole. Hello to both of you. So lots of football to talk about. England and Wales both in action on the same day. Harry, let's go to the Metro first of all, shall we? Bravery of lions elsewhere too. Talking about Iran, in fact, and a hit for six for England, but a suggestion that the rainbow armbands went while the Iranians made, the most brave example to us all, effectively.
Yeah, it seems the FA, Gareth Southgate, Harry Kane got themselves into a bit of a tiz earlier. It was slightly unnecessary, I think, sort of row. It sort of marched itself all the way up to the top of the hill and then back down somewhat, which was very embarrassing when actually I think probably all of this probably could have been sorted out a few days ago. That said, this has been there's two stories around this World Cup. One, the actual football, and two, the controversy surrounding it. Despite getting themselves in a right old mess pre-match, England did absolutely smash it on the pitch. So it's going to be, I feel it's going to be one of those World Cups where the longer it goes on, the better perhaps England and possibly Wales, more likely England do, the less we're going to hear about the controversy and the more we're going to hear about the football. But I can't remember a World Cup like this where there's been so much, controversy around it. Perhaps there should have been in 2018 around when in Russia. I remember there being, a ministerial boycott, but the level of, almost sort of self-censorship in terms of the BBC had going out of their way to not show the opening ceremony, to make a big deal, a big play out of explaining the controversies around the tournament. But I think that's beginning to fade tonight, and the action on the pitch is beginning to become the story.
Absolutely. And, in some senses, Wales not making the fronts of so many papers, but a late penalty, saw them with a great result tonight as well for the first time since 1958, Pippa. But all of those controversies, there was a real concern that it would distract the players, right from the rainbow issues through to fans who didn't use the FIFA app today and many who missed the start of the game, food as well in the stadium, at the fan park in Doha as well. Is the controversy, do you think, something that will stick with the tournament throughout? Or, as Harry said, will it fade as the football comes to the fore?
I think if you're Qatar just now, having gone through all that effort to win the bid for the World Cup in the first place, and to it obviously very unusually be held in the winter, or our winter, because of the extreme temperatures in the summer out there, you might be thinking, really, at this point, was it all worth it? They spent 200 billion quid on it. I mean, that's sort of, I think Russia was about 20 billion. So it's substantially higher than previous World Cups. And yet, if their aim was to try and sort of present themselves as sort of a modern Western nation, or even as the sort of the most open-minded, open to visitors part of the Gulf, then so far that seems to have absolutely fallen flat on its face. Because, as you say, the early hours, the early days of the contest have been overshadowed by rows about their own laws on homosexuality, on the service that's been provided to visitors, alcohol being banned, and the spotlight on some of the politics around it all. I think Harry's right, though. I do think that as the contest gets underway and people get more into the football, some of the sort of political difficulties, the sort of the moment the row has been had, it's kind of fizzled out. Bit of a damp squib, really. In the end, the armband protest. When you consider, particularly as the Metro has done on the front page, the sort of the measures that the Iranian team have taken, not singing their album and criticising the regime. I think the captain did. It looks a bit ineffectual in comparison to that. But I think ultimately, if we get games like we did today, British fans at least, Welsh and English fans, even the Scots amongst us might have an eye on the telly on some occasions, will be focusing more and more on the football and less on the politics.
Yes, well, the Eye has some of those similar issues on the front in its picture story, but underneath is about the questions of how close we should be to Europe and how we go about it. This paper suggesting that EU officials have told the Eye that Number 10 and the Treasury are guilty of wishful thinking over claims they can pursue a closer relationship with the EU without adopting laws such as closer regulation and freedom of movement. So what is the background to all of this Sunday Times, Swiss model story, the denials today from Rishi Sunak at the CBI? Harry, where did this all come from?
Well, it all came from the Chancellor, basically. Late last week, he went on and did an interview where he basically said that over the course of the next 10 years that he will, he hopes that, trade barriers with Europe can be sort of melted away, I think was the expression he used, and trade would become more, with our closest neighbours, can become frictionless. Now, it appears that he has followed this up with some private conversations around Whitehall, perhaps in the ears of journalists, so they ended up on the front page of the Sunday Times. No one is denying that the Chancellor was the source of that story. I've been putting it to them since Sunday morning, and they use this line of "we're not getting into private discussions," which is normally Whitehall code for we're banged to rights, but we're not going to pour any more petrol on this fire. Now, Rishi Sunak has been greeted by a pretty severe backlash from the Brexiteers in the party, concerns that perhaps they could be outflanked on the right at the election. They're already getting hammered by Labour, 5, 6, 7 points for reform or resurgent Nigel Farage on the right, and they're really looking at a proper routing at the next election. So Sunak turns up in Birmingham this morning, determined to slay this story. We've done it up tomorrow as what it was, which is a bit of a slapdown for the Chancellor. We're not doing this. Stop talking about it. This is not on our agenda. And a fairly chastened Jeremy Hunt, I think. Perhaps he's been out of frontline politics really for a few years. Perhaps a little rusty. Perhaps feeling a little bit bruised that the comments he made ended up on the front page of the Sunday Times. But frankly, I think it's in the public interest if politicians are privately discussing this sort of thing. Totally fair game to tell the world that.
Well, you say that, but David Davis was on the radio this evening. He said he got a call at 8 p.m. on Saturday night from the Mail on Sunday who'd got a whiff of the Sunday Times story. And immediately after putting the phone down on the Mail, he called the Chancellor, who categorically denied it was him and said,
Yeah, I saw...
Go on.
I saw that. It's quite carefully worded. The Chancellor said that's not our plans. That's not categorically denying that he had discussed the possibility of one day hoping for it to be. The fact is, it fears that the Chancellor ran his mouth off and has got burnt for that. Sort of they're dancing on the head of a pin a little bit about exactly, who's denying what exactly. But frankly, the story came from somewhere. The Sunday Times don't put a story like that on the front without it being, from the horse's mouth, so to speak.
OK. Well, the Sun picks up on that, as you said, Rishi rapping Hunt's knuckles, as it were, on this Swiss Brexit bid. But as we heard from the CBI, and we'll go on to that with Sir Keir Starmer in just a moment, there is an issue of not enough workers to fill vacancies. There is an issue of the Northern Ireland Protocol, still holding up any further relationship with the European Union. So how do we get rid of some of these trade barriers, Pippa, do you think, and try to smooth export and import issues that have happened since Brexit?
Well, I think the single biggest issue to be resolved, as was obviously mentioned at the CBI today, was the remaining outstanding issues around the Northern Ireland Protocol, and showing that trade across the border between the island of Ireland and Northern Ireland can flow freely and effectively with both sides happy. And I think that would be a really, if they can get that under the belt and show that it's a possibility, then you'd like to think that both sides will be able to move on when it comes to sort of the border trading partnership. And I think on the Hunt stuff, it's no surprise what his view is. He's been saying it privately for months and months and months. And he even went on the radio last week and talked about wanting to remove the vast majority of the trade barriers that exist between us and the EU while remaining outside the single market. So this is obviously his longer term view. It doesn't necessarily mean it's happening right now. And I think that ultimately there will be a desire for trade to operate as smoothly as possible. But Number 10 was quite clear today on their red lines. There would be no return to the single market. There'd be no return to freedom of movement. There'd be no alignment with rules that are imposed by Brussels, or any what they regarded as unnecessary payments, or anything which puts British trade deals with other countries at risk. So, that's quite a lot of red lines when it comes to reaching smoother trade agreements, and actually doesn't leave that much space for anything which would make actually a sort of significant macroeconomic difference when it comes to trading with the EU. So, but all the suggestions today, despite this story bubbling up over the weekend, all the suggestions today is that smoother trade is something that is a long-term ambition rather than anything which is actually, being discussed actively in the corridors or even the staterooms of Number 10 and Number 11 right now. It's a debate that's getting started, but not one that is anywhere near completion.
Yes, and if we look at the Daily Telegraph, one of the biggest issues there, obviously, was about migrant labour and its role in increasing productivity. And then here is Sir Keir Starmer, who will also tell the CBI that the UK needs to wean itself off migrant labour. Real hardening, then, do you think, of the stance from Labour on this policy?
Absolutely. I think this is a really important moment, actually, and I hate to go full X Factor and talk about a journey, but Keir Starmer's journey from, devout people's vote campaigning, second referendum, let's use every tool in the box to undo Brexit, to, future Prime Minister wannabe. And he's putting a real marker down tomorrow. It's remarkable that he actually sounds, almost harder line on migration and Britain's borders than perhaps some in the new cabinet might be if you push them on it. A really significant intervention from Starmer. He's going to say, look, it's almost sort of he's putting some distance here between him and Blair, him and Mandelson, him and Gordon Brown, who basically used mass migration from Europe to try and kickstart and grow Britain through GDP, by inflating GDP, by opening up the borders. He's saying, no, you cannot do that. And at the same time, he's being quite tough with business. He's saying, look, at the same time, we have to expect you to be doing the training, to be paying people properly, to be, this could be a Boris Johnson speech from any moment of his premiership, where he was trying to make this case that actually we're controlling our borders, but you've got the business people have to pay people properly and train people properly, because you're not going to have that access to cheap labour. Really important moment for Keir Starmer. I wonder how it's going to go down with the left of his party.
Well, let's ask Pippa with one additional question, if you don't mind. Sir Keir Starmer will say we need to start investing more in training up workers who are already here. What about the farming community? They tried that, didn't they, with British people doing the fruit picking and all those other jobs. A lot of it sent to rot. What was it? £600 million of food that was thrown away because it wasn't harvested, and people didn't last 8 hours. Is there an argument that Britons don't want to do certain jobs in this country, a role that was filled by migrant workers, or is that an old-fashioned attitude now?
Well, it's certainly something which people claim, isn't it? But this is a discussion that's been going on behind the scenes with Labour for some time now. Rachel Reeves, in particular, the Shadow Chancellor, has been pushing this idea of saying, look, if we have workers here, economically inactive people here that could work, what we need to be doing is encouraging them back into the labour market. And as Harry rightly says, part of that equation is part of that has to be on business and making sure that the training and skills and development are there, and also the pay, good quality jobs, Labour have stressed. But the other bit of it is that if you look at the figures, there are millions of people, like it's more than 2 million people that are currently economically inactive and out of the labour market because of their health. And we heard the beginnings of this in Keir Starmer's Labour conference speech when he talked about public services, sound public services that can deliver, being key to growth. Because, for example, you have 2 million people that are economically inactive because of their health. If they're waiting for operations or procedures, the single best way to get them back into the labour market quickly is to drive down those waiting lists, which are currently 6 or 7 million people long. The same applies across education as well, of course.
Okay.
And if the training and skills agenda there and the funding is there, then you're going to be able to get more people into the workplace. So it's about the holistic approach, not just being a responsibility of business to drive growth and to pay better and create better conditions, but also on the state to make sure that the public sector is working adequately in order to be able to free up those people that may want to work but are currently economically inactive.
Sorry to butt in. We've got stuff to pack in after the break as well. I do apologise. Lots more to come, as I said. Why you will pay for MP's Christmas parties, according to the Mail. Back with that and more in just a moment. Welcome back. You're watching the press preview. We are joined once again by Pippa Crerar and Harry Cole. Welcome back to both of you. Pippa, we go to your story in The Guardian on Dominic Raab. Tell us more.
This is yet another allegation about Dominic Raab, Justice Secretary and Deputy Prime Minister, and his behaviour towards civil servants. I mean, these have been rumbling on now for the best part of 10 days. Number 10, I think, after the budget was hoping that they'd gone away, despite the fact that there was 2 formal complaints put in, which are currently being investigated, or not currently being investigated because nobody's been appointed yet to investigate them, but will be investigated. And the latest story is that Dominic Raab behaved so badly in a meeting with the Home Office during his first stint as Justice Secretary that his department's top official, a woman called Antonio Romeo, who's the permanent secretary there, had to personally call up Home Office counterparts afterwards to apologise. I should say that neither department denied that this apology call took place and just suggests that the departments work hand in glove. And there are regular follow-up calls after cross-departmental meetings. But my sources are clear that this call took place after alleged poor behaviour, badly and inappropriately that he behaved so badly and inappropriately at the high-level meeting earlier this year.
Are you keeping a tally of how many people whose jobs you may have cost?
I'm not sure that's fair.
Well, Boris Johnson was one, I suppose, that started, but yes, you're right. Anyway, Daily Mail, you pay for MPs' Christmas parties. Tell us more, Harry.
Yeah, this is one of those stories you read, you just think, what on earth? How many meetings had people sit in where this got signed off? How many email chains were there where someone thought this was a good idea and no one saw this front page coming? So the MP's expenses regime, pretty strict since 2009. MPs can't really claim. They can claim for sort of office upkeep, but within that, it appears this year they're allowed to claim for Christmas decorations and no booze, but the cost of entertaining your staff for a Christmas party in your office. Very strange one. I wonder how long that will last in the fullness of time, given the circumstances, given the economic mood, the cost of living crisis. Any suggestion that MPs, are on the take, they tend to take a pretty dim view with pretty quickly once it's been exposed. So I wonder how long that perk will last.
Harry Cole, Pippa Crerar, thank you both very much indeed. Thank you.